If you watched my video from a couple of weeks ago where I basically moaned for 10 minutes about the frustrations of modern tech, you'll know that I had a bit of a problem with my Wheeltop EDS-TX group set. Now, having watched that video back a couple of times, I'm reminded of that saying that goes, never respond to an email when angry, because that actually also applies to making YouTube videos, although I should paraphrase it slightly by saying never make a YouTube video while frustrated, because that was probably a little bit of an overstatement on my part in that video. So I wanted to take this video to try and be a little bit more objective and give a bit more of a balanced view and let you know exactly what was wrong with the group set. The first thing I want to do though is address some of the comments in that video that effectively said this was always bound to happen with a budget group set. Now, in answer to that, I'd say that all types of tech these days go wrong. It's the nature of any modern piece of kit that as it gets more and more advanced, there are more components within it that have the potential to go wrong. And that's the case regardless of how much the item costs. So in biking terms, regardless of whether it's Shimano, SRAM, Campag, or even Wheeltop. With that in mind then, the real test of how much confidence you can have in any given product is in how the company deals with any issues as they arise. And that's especially true for manufacturers that don't have a physical presence in your country, because then it always makes it just a little bit more difficult to return things or get issues resolved. On that front, I've actually been very impressed with Wheeltop, but I'll come on to that a little bit later, because first I want to take you through what went wrong with this, the things that I tried to get it working again, and ultimately how I've had to resolve the issue in the hope that this might help anyone else who's going through a similar thing. So if you watched my video from the other week, you'll know that I headed out on my normal Sunday morning ride. I got about 10 meters up the road and all of a sudden something didn't seem right. Yes, my right hand shifter wasn't moving the rear derailleur up and down the rear cassette. So the first thing I did was went into the Wheeltop app, as I thought that the issue was going to be that I'd forgotten to charge the front and rear derailleur for a while and it was just going to be dead. But when I went into the app, I saw that the front derailleur still had about 65% battery and the rear derailleur still had 40%. So both of them had plenty of juice in them and that shouldn't have been the issue. But what I did notice is that there was a software update for every component, basically the left and right shifter, the front derailleur and the rear derailleur. And that's not surprising because it had been a while since I'd taken this bike out. I'd been off this road bike for a while, I'd had a few gravel rides, I took a few e-bikes out just for a bit of a fun ride, and so I hadn't been on this for a while. So it wasn't that surprising that there were a few updates to be done. So I decided, well, do I sit by the cold, wet and windy side of the road and do this, or do Jimmy and I head back to my kitchen and we'll do it in the nice warm comfort of my house? So that's what we did. So we headed back, we did a quick software update, I had my fingers crossed and I thought, right, hopefully that's it and it will get back working again. Unfortunately, that didn't fix the problem. And so while I continued to diagnose what was going wrong, I sent Jimmy on his way because I didn't want to hold him up. He went out on his bike ride and I tried for another half an hour or so just to try and diagnose the problem and try and get this thing working. Ultimately, I couldn't, so I had to end up going out on my gravel bike, which ended up being a really fun ride. So I suppose I should be thankful for a bit of an issue with this. But when I got back, I thought, right, I need to have a proper look at this thing to try and figure out what's wrong with it and try and fix it, because I can't just keep relying on my gravel bike every weekend to go out on a road ride. So I went straight back into the app to try and have a look if there was anything in there I could do to try and get this derailleur working. Now, when I went into the app, there is a function where you can move up and down the cassette just using the app itself. And when I tried that, the derailleur did move. When I pressed plus, it came down the cassette, and when I pressed minus, it went back up again. So there wasn't an issue with the derailleur receiving communication. That bit was working perfectly. So then I thought, well, hang on, maybe there's an issue with the shifter not seeing the rear derailleur, and maybe that is a pairing issue. So I had a look at all the pairing, and everything that I could find within the app said that the front shifters and the front and rear derailleurs were attached. They should be talking to each other, but clearly that wasn't the issue. I then remembered that within the app you can change the polarity, for want of a better word, of these buttons. So you have a smaller button and a larger button. One moves the derailleur one way, one moves it the other way. You can switch round the position of those. So if you're more comfortable using the bigger button to go down the cassette, you can use that, and then the smaller button to go back up. When I switched those around and then tried to use the derailleur again, despite the fact that they were both set to do different things in the app, both buttons pushed the derailleur down to the highest gear. Neither of them would push it back up again. I went back into the app, I swapped those buttons over again, and then both buttons pushed it back up the cassette, and I'll show you that now. So just to show that the system is actually live and working, when I press for the front derailleur, that's working perfectly. However, when I press either of the buttons on the front here, nothing happens. But when I go into the app and I change around the polarity of the buttons, so I'll make the smaller button move down the cassette and the larger button move back up the cassette again, when I set that, you'll notice now the derailleur moves, but it doesn't matter which button I press, both of them are moving the derailleur down the cassette. And if I swap the buttons back over again and set that in the app and press either button again, so that's one button, that's the other button, and they're both moving the derailleur one way again up and down the cassette. So it seems as though the front shifter is only recognising one of the two buttons. So at that point I got on the email to Wheeltop to ask the experts what might be the issue here, and in their credit they came back to me very, very quickly, within about 12 hours, to say they've spoken to the technicians and they suggested unpairing everything, unbinding all of the components, and then trying to rebind them in the app. So I went away and gave that a go, and I have to say that that wasn't the easiest process either, because the question it asks is, do you want to cancel pairing? Which makes it sound like you're just setting this up for the first time and you want to abandon the pairing process, whereas these have been obviously paired for quite some time now and you're just trying to unpair them. But I think that is just a function of Chinese translated into English. So just as I had an issue trying to figure out how to pair all of these items together when I first installed it, because the instructions were very much in heavily translated Chinese to English, it's a similar issue here. But again, once you get your head around it, it isn't actually too difficult to understand. So I managed to unpair all of the items, and the other thing to say is it doesn't necessarily look like they're unpaired because it will still show them in the dashboard of the app. But you'll notice that the MAC address that is normally above each of the components on the dashboard of the app is showing zeros the whole way across, and that way you know that you have successfully unpaired any or all of the items. Now once I did that, I went and repaired them exactly the same way I did when I first installed them. So that is where you plug the rear derailleur into power, you then remove the power, and you can see a little blue LED light on the back which tells you that it's gone into Bluetooth pairing mode. You then, having taken the batteries out of the shifters, put one of the batteries in, close the compartment, press one of the buttons, you'll see a green flashing light on the front of the shifter, and then you should see a corresponding flashing light on the derailleur, and that tells you that they've paired. You then do the same thing again, you plug the rear derailleur into power, you do the front shifter, you get the same lights to show that they've been paired, and then finally you plug it into power again, take it off of power, and you pair the front derailleur. Now, as I said, for the build video of this, that is a little bit cumbersome, it feels a little bit clunky, but it does work, and again, once you've got your head around it, it is fairly simple. So I was hoping that once I had everything taken apart and then everything repaired and put back together, we would have a fully working system. Alas, that still wasn't the case, and so I still had a problem in that the front right shifter seemed to only be recognising one button. So this brings me back on to what I was saying earlier about having confidence in a company when one of their components goes wrong, and it's how they deal with the issue. If they choose to ignore it and they blow you off, well then largely that company should be discredited, and rightly so. But if the company stand behind their product and they realise that things do go wrong and will go wrong, but they're there to back you up if they do, then I think that is commendable. And to Wheeltop's credit, they got back to me very, very quickly again and said, yeah, this seems like there is an issue with this front right shifter. We will get you a new one sent out and we'll get you to send this one back to us. And they've actually sent me a return label, so it's not going to cost me anything to send that back to them. Now, I am acutely aware that I make videos and reviews of these products, so I was just a little bit concerned that I might have been getting a slightly enhanced service than that of a standard consumer. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to big myself up there. I am by no means a big YouTuber. However, I am still making videos on these products, and no company wants any sort of video or any sort of news going out about their products not being very good and then the company not dealing with it properly. So I did ask Wheeltop, look, if I was a standard consumer and I was in this same situation, I'd had this issue where the shifter isn't working, I was within warranty, I bought the product directly from yourselves, would I still get the same level of service? And they said yes, if any problem occurs during the warranty period, they will send out a new item, but you will have to send the faulty item back, which is absolutely fine. To be honest, I'm not going to get any more use out of that anyway, and it's probably useful for Wheeltop to have it back and for Wheeltop to do a bit of an autopsy on it to try and figure out what went wrong, to try and make future iterations even better. So I think that is very impressive of Wheeltop. Again, a lot of people will slate these budget Chinese companies by saying they won't give you any backup, you've got no recourse if anything goes wrong, but it just shows you that Wheeltop seem to be very keen to stand right behind their product when things go wrong, because things, as I said earlier, inevitably will go wrong from time to time, and it is just one of those unfortunate things. But if they deal with it properly, then again, that is very commendable. So I'm ultimately going to have to take this off, strip all the bar tape off, and if you know me, if you've watched any of my bike build videos, you'll know how much that pains me, because I absolutely hate doing bar wrapping, but that is the case, that's what I've got to do. So I'm going to have to strip this off, take the shifter off, send that back to Wheeltop, and they will send me another one. And then hopefully in a few weeks' time, I'll have this back up and running with the new shifter on and everything working perfectly again. But I will keep you updated on that. And I will also ask Wheeltop if they can keep me updated on anything they find out from the shifter that I'm sending back, just to try and give you guys a bit more of an update as to what might be the issue. Potentially, if you can deal with this yourselves at home rather than having to send the unit back, wait for a couple of weeks for a new one to come. So yes, that is the situation currently. This bike is unrideable, essentially. That said, if you were really desperate to use a bike that you had this situation on, you can go into the app and change the right and left shifter so that the right shifter, which you'd normally use with the front derailleur, you could change that to move it up the cassette and change the other shifter to move it down the cassette. So you could essentially then run a one-buy system. Again, if you were really desperate to use the bike, you were out on it and this situation arose, or you had a big event coming up that you needed the bike for and you couldn't afford to have it off the road for a couple of weeks. So there are ways that you can get around it and you can use it in a desperate situation. But again, it is nice to know that where the issue can't be resolved at home, Wheeltop are willing to replace the part and get you back on the road again. So there you go. Hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully you're not in this situation at all, but if you do find yourself in this situation, hopefully that might help a little bit. You might find that unbinding, unpairing all the components and then rebinding them might solve your issue, because Wheeltop did seem to think that that would solve the problem in the first place, but alas, in my case, it didn't. But if nothing else, you at least know that if you're within the warranty period, you can send it back and get a replacement from Wheeltop. I hope you found that useful and interesting, and when I get any more update on this, I will let you know. So for now, I'll say thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one, where I'll probably be riding my gravel bike again, because yeah, this one ain't going anywhere anytime soon. So thank you very much for watching. I'll see you then. Take care, guys. Ride safe.